Hello again, it's your friendly neighborhood host, JT Wheatley, back for another episode of the History Comics Podcast, this time with part 2 of the life of Mike Grell. When we last left off, Mike Grell had made his name at DC Comics, not only with the runs on Green Arrow, but also with his own created work, Warlord. But he would soon move on to his own creator-owned work, but before that, he still had a few more projects at DC to work out. Mike Grell would get a chance to work on Batman for DC, but he stated he didn't like what he produced. Grell did like the Heart of Vampire story for Detective Comics number 455 on January 1976 with Bernie Wrightson, though he gives most of the credit to Wrightson, who had already had the story plotted and broken down, along with providing some serious thumbnails for Grell to work off of. However, DC made him redraw his version of Dracula as it resembled the actor Christopher Lee, one of the great actors to play Dracula, too much. Mike Grell would return to work on the character with an Elseworlds one-shot Batman Mask in 1997, which loosely adapts the classic Phantom of the Opera, but now starring Batman and with Harvey Dent as the Phantom. Mike Grell's next project at DC was Green Lantern Green Arrow with Denny O'Neil. Grell was a big fan of Green Arrow as a kid and especially loved working with Denny O'Neil, praising his writing ability. Grell especially liked how O'Neil broke down dialogue. He had a rule of only 12 words per balloon and 100 words per page, along with pointing out characters should never talk about the action they're actually doing. As a result, O'Neil's script was usually half a page for a comic book page and was very collaborative, with Grell taking many of his suggestions. He would point out that while O'Neil was cooperative, he was also the editor of the book on top of being the writer, so technically Grell's boss. Of course, DC originally wanted Neil Adams to return to the book but was unavailable, so Grell jumped at the chance, calling the series the gold standard of comic books at the time. Another project fulfilled Mike Grell's childhood dreams was the Tarzan newspaper strip, and enjoyed meeting the previous artists on the strip, Russ Manning and Doug Wilde, at the San Diego Comic Book Convention. Grell got the job when he was approached by Archie Goodwin to take over the strip from him and Gil Kane as they were leaving to work on Star Wars. Goodwin knew Grell was a huge Tarzan fan and he didn't want to leave the strip without someone taking over. On Tarzan, Grell also wrote, lettered, and colored, taking over the Sunday strip while the dailies were just reprints of the original run. Grell scripted the story well in advance and preferred doing vertical over square panels to emphasize Tarzan swinging through the trees. Story-wise, Grell started with the Lost City of Oprah story, as he wanted the strip to return to its more traditional roots. He also expanded on Jane's backstory, having Tarzan and her go to her home of Wisconsin at one point. Grell made sure he had the strip produced 9 weeks in advance, which he worked on from July 19, 1981 to February 27 of 1983. Thanks to his career being long established, Mike Grell started to win awards around this time. Most notably in 1982, Mike Grell won the Inkpot Award and would later be inducted into the Overstreet Hall of Fame and the Wizards Legends Hall of Fame. Mike Grell would later move on to creator-owned projects, finally, but he first tried to pitch one at DC called Starslayer. His take on this character was the reverse of the Warlord, as this time it was a primitive man in futuristic space, with a Celtic warrior taking to the far future. However, after the DC implosion, the project was shelved, thus Grell took his idea to Pacific Comics, originally as a black and white portfolio. This ended up selling 1,200 copies and would be Grell's first creator-owned work. Grell was one of the first artists signed on at Pacific Comics, followed by Jack Kirby and then Neil Adams. Pacific Comics was able to produce 6 issues beginning in February of 1982 before going bankrupt. Thus, Grell took Starslayer the First Comics, who continued the series in August of 1983 with issue number 7, with John Ostrander and Tim Truman later working on it. The series would continue to run for a total of 34 issues, ending on November of 1985. Of note, The Rocketeer by Dave Stevens made his first appearance in Starslayer number 2 on April of 1982, while in issue number 5, Gru the Wanderer by Sergio Aragonés appeared, and then in issue number 10 of November of 1983, Grimjack by Tim Truman and John Ostrander also made his first appearance. Starslayer would later be reprinted by Valiant Comics in 1993, and in 1995, Acclaim Comics produced Starslayer Delector's Cut, which ran for 8 issues. To date, Mike Grell still owns the rights to Starslayer. After this, Mike Grell moved on to his next creator-owned work with John Sable, Freelance, which he designed as being the opposite of Batman, as this time the mercenary who is also a children's book author. In fact, it's his civilian persona is where he wears a costume, putting on glasses and a wig when he has to appear in public for book signings. This would be produced by First Comics, with the first issue appearing in June of 1983 and meant for more mature readers, as Sable dealt with his enemies in very violent ways. Grell produced 56 issues over 5 years, ending on February of 1988, which was the same time that First Comics ceased publishing altogether. Mike Grell would later return to the character, producing John Sable freelance Bloodthirl for IDW Publishing in March of 2005, and Ashes of Eden, an online series in 2007 that was later published as a 5-issue miniseries from 2009 to 2010. In addition, IDW started reprinting the original series in trade paperback form. Under his original contract with First Comics, they would retain the rights to Sable for 10 years as long as it was remained in print, and if it ever stopped printing, Sable would revert to Grell after 3 years. As a result, when Grell left Sable, other creators like Marv Wolfman, Dennis Cohen, and Mike Mignola took over for a time. Of note, Sable will be adapted into a TV show originally with Gene Simmons, the lead singer of Kiss, bought the rights to it with the intention of playing the lead character. Eventually, Simmons dropped out with Louis Van Bergen replacing him as Sable, but by then the TV producers had changed the entire concept of the show, with the children's book offer being Sable's real identity over the Dark Avenger, something that went against what Grell had created. The show is probably most famous for being the acting debut of Rene Russo, who played Eden Kendall in the series. Grell himself stated that she was destined to be a star and she would eventually return to comic books in the MCU, playing Frigga, Thor's mother. The Sable TV show debuted on November 7, 1987 on ABC, produced by Gary Sherman and starring Louis Van Bergen, and ended on January 2, 1988 after 7 episodes. Since then, plans for a movie adaptation have been floated, but nothing concrete so far. Grell's personal choice to play Sable today is actor Colin Farrell. However, it will be Grell's first work at First Comics that will eventually return him to DC. Mike Grell first met Mike Gold at the first Chicago Comics Convention in 1976. At the time, he was the founder of First Comics before becoming a senior editor at DC Comics. At DC, he got Mike Grell to return to work on Green Arrow with a pitch of him being an urban hunter. On the book, Mike Grell made Green Arrow older than the other DC heroes, which is maintained to this day, along with providing him with a hooded costume, as in the story, Green Arrow and Black Canary moved to Seattle. Thus, they would have to deal with the rain. Originally, Mike Grell created Black Arrow, a female vigilante and a Holocaust survivor. Starting off with the 3-issue miniseries, The Longbow Hunters, August to October of 1987, it would have Green Arrow actually kill people and move away from trick arrows, dealing with more down-to-earth criminals like drug dealers and serial killers. In addition, Grell avoided using superpowers, thus Black Canary doesn't have her canary cry as a result of a severe beating she takes during the series, which also later reveals she is unable to have children as a result as well. After the Longbow Hunter series, Grell would write and do the covers for 80 issues of the regular Green Arrow series that followed, even drawing a few of them. Mike Grell's run on Green Arrow would have a lasting impact on the series and characters, setting the tone that has remained to this day. It is especially influencing on the Arrow TV show from 2012 on the CW network, capturing the tone and style of his books. Grell greatly enjoyed the show and especially liked Stephen Amell's work as the character, calling him a movie star. Of note, the show would incorporate some of his styles, such as the hooded suit, and his own characters he created for the comic, like Eddie Frears and Shadow. However, he did object to Shadow being changed from a Japanese to Chinese woman, accusing the producers of seeing all Asians as the same. This did not stop Mike Grell from providing covers for the comic book adaptation of the show, which provided a 10-page comic for the San Diego Comic Book Convention 2012 to promote the series, along with art in issues number 6 through 11 of the digital series. Mike Grell would later produce 3 Howard Hale books, the famed archer, who was often billed as the world's greatest archer, and who parlayed that skill into acting and stunt performing. Notably, he provided the archery shots for the brilliant Adventures of Robin Hood movie of 1938. In real life, Mike Grell is a skilled archer and even performed as a jouster with the Seattle Knights. Mike Grell would later work on a James Bond series for Acme Press and Eclipse Comics based on the original books by Ian Fleming, but not the movies. Thus, he was restricted in what he could use. For example, he could not use the character Q, since he was created for the movies, so Grell used Major Bofrod as Bond's quartermaster from the books. He also was hired to adapt the License to Kill script into a graphic novel. For the look of James Bond, Grell based on the look of the actor of Hoagie Carmichael, who was Ian Fleming's original inspiration for the character. He couldn't use any likenesses of the movie's actors like Sean Connery, naturally. Grell even introduces Bond's 3-inch facial scar across his right cheek from the book and added a new gun. This resulted in the Permission to Die graphic novel. During the early Image Revolution, Mike Grell was approached by Todd McFarlane to produce a creator-owned series there, hoping to branch out after the success of the original founders. What Grell came up with was Shaman Tears, about a Native American with mystical powers. The character's name was Joshua Brand, a half-Irish, half-Sioux, who transforms into Stalker Wolf, where he fought the Circle C Enterprises. The series debuted in May of 1993 with sales of 595,000, and the villains' names were an attack on copyright practices. Grell would consult the Lakota to ensure authenticity for these characters. Unfortunately, Grell had to take shaman tears away from Image after issue number 2 as the speculator class of the 90s was occurring and sales were dropping across the board. Grell would bring in his own creator-owned character, John Sable, appearing in issues number 5 to 8. Shaman tears eventually would run for 13 issues. He meant for it to be an ongoing series, but the sales prevented that as he got caught up in the speculation collapse where comics were sold as collectibles over being actual stories. Mike Grell later tried Maggie the Cat series, believing a female lead book were now selling, but that was also a loss as well, so he pulled the plug, which is the reason the series was never finished. He later wrote and drew the covers for Bar Sinister, a spin-off series of the Shaman Tears for Windjammer, the creator-owned imprint of Valiant Comics, which ran for 4 issues from June to September of 1995, which followed an escaped group of government experiments who were originally animals. Mike Grell also wrote and penciled a 2-issue Shaman Tears Turok the Dinosaur Hunter crossover, but was never published, though he did work on the Turok series itself, including the 2-issue Turok the Hunted. After this, he was approached by Marvel editor Tom Brevoort to revive Spider-Man in the 1990s, which would have been the first time Grell ever worked for the House of Ideas. After 5 months of development work, nothing came of it, but it did lead to Mike Grell working on Iron Man from 2002 to 2003. The first thing Grell did was tone down the power of his armor, along with making Tony Stark not as physically fit. Grell complained that he was basically Superman inside and out of the armor. Grell would later comment he loved Robert Downey Jr.'s performance as the character in the MCU movies, and especially loved the ending of the first Iron Man in 2008, in which, spoilers, Tony Stark does reveal his identity to the world, as this is something Mike Grell did in Iron Man number 55, Volume 3, on May of 2002, though this was met with mixed fan reactions at the time. Mike Grell also contributed his stories to the X-Men Forever series in the 2000s. In 2008, Mike Grell returned to work at DC, providing a variant cover for Action Comics number 861, which was part of the Superman and the Legion of Superheroes crossover, as DC wanted past Legion artists to provide work for the event, which also included Stephen Light and Keith Giffen. His last collaborative work with DC was in 2011 with DC Retroactives series, where the past of the characters like Batman and Green Lantern are revisited. Outside of comic books, Mike Grell also provided illustrations for the Howard Pyle's The Adventures of Robin Hood for the Dawning Company. For his sources, Mike Grell liked using Mark Ryan, as he was a talented entertainer who was everything from a voice in the Transformers cartoon to teaching Keira Knightley how to swing a sword in King Arthur, or Christian Bale to shoot a bow and arrow in Gods and Kings. A lot of it came from his past services working for the British Army's Intelligence Corps, along with a licensed private investigator in the United States. Seriously, look this guy up. He reads like a comic book character. Grell and Ryan would work together on the graphic novel The Pilgrim, based on a secret British occult program during World War II and inspired by Ryan's work on British intelligence. Unfortunately, the money ran out by the time the 3rd book was being produced. Mike Grell also would work for Todd McFarlane's comic Spawn, along with the series Swamp Angel, a multi-generational story inspired by his own family. He pitched the story to DC, as it already had interest in turning it into a film. Today, Mike Grell continues to do commissions, but is mostly retired. He prefers to work from home, trying to keep a 9-to-5 schedule, but jokes he only gets more production in the last 5 days of a project over the first 15. Grell prefers working with 8.5 by 11 sheets, which he later enlarges to an autograph projector, and apparently that's how he still works to this day. And that is a rambling and too brief biography of the great Mike Grell, the talented artist and writer who truly left his mark in the industry. Whether reinventing classic characters like Green Arrow or creating some of his own, Mike Grell is a true example of the writer-artist dual threat, and comic books are all the better for it. I would like to thank the main source for this episode, Mike Grell, Life is Drawing Without an Eraser by Dewey Castle and Jeff Mezler, which features a great interview by the comic book legend along with some gorgeous reprints of his art. A must-read for any fan.
Look, we gotta talk.
Yeah, Thunder Talk.
We're going all kinds of sideways with that sweet nerd junk.
Woke nerd junk.
It's topical.
Political.
Dare I say radical.
We've got all your latest news and reviews.
Hot music.
And a whole lot of comedy.
But it ain't for kids.
Definitely mature content.
So let's talk.
Let's talk Thunder Talk.
Thunder Talk is a proud member of the ESO Network.
And now is February 6th, 2025. Time for the favorite comic of the week. Absolute Superman, number 4, by Jason Aaron and Rafa Sandoval, which is a great issue that actually focuses on Lois Lane and also the Omega Man, who are like the resistance against the Lazarus Project, which Lois Lane is a part of, as they're both searching for Superman for their own interests, but you kind of start to get the feeling they may be more aligned than they care to admit. Aaron does a great job basically telling a Superman story about Superman in it as you see getting the Lois Lane's perspective, especially with her relationship with her father and why she became an agent for the Lazarus Project and working with the Peacemakers, who are clearly a fairly fascist organization, but you can tell even she has a bit of a problem with them. And the Omega Man, of course, one of the reveals of the identity is a very cool twist, which once again harkens back to the original Superman mythos. And there's some nice nods there, too, especially with Rafael Sandoval's gorgeous art, which, once again, he managed to really show Superman and really how powerful he is. And also great some down-to-earth action, too, matched with that. So this is easily the best Superman book on the stands right now. And another example of why the Absolute Universe has been one of the best things DC's done in quite some time. So great read from beginning to end. And with that, we will conclude with this life of the great Mike Grell. Join me again next week for another biography. And until then, go enjoy yourself a good comic book. And definitely go out and check out all those Absolute DC books, because they're fantastic from beginning to end.